Ladies and gentlemen, let's RedGamingTech.com video. We're going to be discussing a recent interview with none other than Mark Cerny. Mark Cerny, I'm sure, doesn't really require an introduction at this point. He is, of course, the lead architect behind the PlayStation 4. And he's been discussing why he feels the next generation PlayStation is going to fundamentally alter gaming. That's his quote, not mine, of course, when it's launched this year. So, a lot of this, of course, goes over some familiar ground, although he does go over some new stuff as well, and it's quite an interesting, if somewhat biased, of course, take on the next generation. But we're going to go over it anyway and just see what he has to say for himself. Now, I'm sure it's fairly common knowledge by now that Mark himself and his team set out questionnaires and started to ask people, developers more to the point, hey guys, what do you want on the next generation PlayStation? Now, he couldn't, of course, come out and ask certain things because of confidentiality and so forth, but he wanted to know, what specifications, how the machine would be put together, and so on. So obviously they could develop around that. So anyway, he further illuminates us on this process during this interview. For hardware architecture, we focused on the current business partners of the company. We went through the top 20 to 40 games and spoke to those teams. We didn't stop there. We kept going on and on, having conversations as we developed systems, software, and the like. So what that means is, starting last year when the dev kits became available, those conversations expanded essentially everyone making the games in the industry. So, what else did he have to say? Well, the hardware is based on custom chips that have tremendously long lead time. So when we were discussing with developers what the custom chips should be, it was 2008/2009, and we didn't have the indie phenomenon that you see today. So the integration of the indie community on a technological level is really recent. Sorry guys, I seem to be having one of those days where I can't seem to speak properly, but anyway, to continue, we wanted the focus to be on the games and the creative directors wanted to make, rather than on the hardware that's universal. That's true when we're talking Destiny, with their 700-strong team, or we're talking about one guy doing everything. They want to focus on the creative vision. At the same time, we have to balance that out with rich feature sets so they can use the later years of the hardware. The hardware has to grow over time. That's why I refer to it as a supercharged PC architecture. There's more in it than what you would find in a PC. There are all of these customizations, such as what we did to the GPU and other parts of the system, to ensure that those would be systems that programmers could dig into in years 3 or 4 of the console's life cycle. The developers really have a chance to study that architecture because it doesn't change for many years. They can learn its secrets and get progressively better performance out of it. Just in case you're wondering, guys, out of quote for a second, he's basically referring to the fact that it's so close to a PC. In other words, okay, they've got something to hit the ground running with, but then, of course, they can improve on what they've got. To continue, consoles also provide a stable platform. This is really important because some developers need 5 years to create a game. The fact that during those 5-year periods the target hardware doesn't really change allows them to bring titles to the world that wouldn't exist otherwise. I look at this historically, the PlayStation 1 was a really magical time because we had a tremendous variety of software. Really good games that were made by just a few people for just a few $100,000. So we had titles like Parappa the Rapper at retail and were really embraced by the gaming public. So we're seeing a lot of people who want to contribute more broadly and deeply who are joining small teams. There are also small teams coming from PC. As a result, we're now getting that variety of titles due to the very accessible nature of the PS4. They're coming to the console and they act to balance out AAA games. A variety of experiences is the key to the PlayStation 4. I think we're going to see incredible variety on the PS4. He also speaks about indie developers. Now, indies have one huge problem compared to, say, first party titles, or say games from Electronic Arts and so on. Namely, the fact that it becomes increasingly harder for them to market their titles. Now, On PC, they have certain means. For example, they've got Steam. YouTube is a fantastic place, of course, to market certain games. One would argue that 3 titles instantly come to mind here. Terraria, Minecraft, and Amnesia for the PC, of course, simply would not have become as popular as they are without certain Let's Players. Minecraft, for example, as soon as you say Minecraft, you automatically think of Yogscast. And so, one of the purposes behind the share functionality of the PS4 is actually to enable you, gamers, to basically share your games. Now, this, of course, will do a couple of things. One, it will allow you to share footage of your best replays on AAA games, but also it will encourage smaller indie titles to be shown off as well. And as a slight aside, this is one of the things that Nintendo are really struggling with right now. They're really struggling with the grasp of social media, and Sony are just blatantly just saying, you know what, guys, we know that this is the way forward. I'll give you guys a very, very, very small taste, if you will, a small idea of what I'm talking about here. There was recent news regarding Nintendo. It's a pretty small piece of news, so I didn't really bother to cover it. But basically, there was a huge uproar in the fighting game community because I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with the tournament, but there's a tournament that's going to be taking place this weekend in the United States called EVO, or Evolution. And this tournament attracts thousands of players on a variety of different games, including Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, and Smash Bros. Melee. Now, Nintendo actually issued a cease and desist order to the tournament owners, and they said, well, actually, we don't want you to stream this game. Not only don't we want you to stream this game, we want you to not even play the game. We want you to completely abolish that tournament, so it's gone. Now, bear in mind that this was really odd because many players really respected this, and they got up in arms, is really what it comes down to. And it turns out that Nintendo had to reverse the decision. Now, my purpose of bringing Nintendo into a Sony video, because obviously the two aren't really linked, and I don't really like to do that typically, but my purpose is to show you really what social media now is doing. This is one of the reasons that Mark and his team, of course, decided to include this, and I'll allow you to read more of the quote. The community is able to elevate the visibility of titles they find compelling. So, if you like The Witness and you can post a video or say something in a feed, if you're not sure about a game and you see a friend playing it, there's a headphone jack on the controller and you can just call them up to get their opinion. The games community will not need someone outside to tell them what to play. They'll figure it out amongst themselves. So, out of quote, this is pretty much what I was referring to. When you start to share your experiences, when guys and girls, of course, now are becoming more and more in the know. They're starting to know a hell of a lot more. They're starting to understand a lot more in the gaming community, and more to the point, they're becoming a lot more interactive inside the gaming community. I mean, our channel, RGT, of course, is fairly small, but even so, we have a really good interaction with the fans. I mean, anyone who regularly watches the videos or goes to our Facebook, which is facebook.com/redgamingtech, he says, well, plug, will know just how grateful we are to you guys. But the thing that I notice is that maybe it's just the channel, the subject matter or whatever, but a lot of you guys are really in the know about this stuff, and sometimes, of course, you point out news that I simply just have missed, because obviously there's only a certain amount, and I love that. I really do. I really like the fact that you guys message me and pull me up and say, "Oi, by the way, guys, you missed this, or you got the release date of this wrong, or there's the latest news on the latest X, whatever the X is." And the point being is that now, the quicker that you start embracing this, and the PlayStation is definitely all about that. So, I mean, the PlayStation 3 had a lot of problems. One, of course, was cross-game chat. And interestingly enough, if you guys watch the 20 things you didn't know about the PS4, and okay, some of them, most people probably knew, like the fact that you could upgrade the hard drive and blah, 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 but one of the things they noticed and were really proud of is the fact they had cross-game chat. And, of course, they got kind of blasted with this. Anyway, I'm going to continue because Mark certainly hasn't finished his interview yet. I started playing games in the era of the Atari 2600, and there was one button on the controller. The DualShock 4 has 16 buttons, and AAA games will use most of them. It's not an issue for you or me, because we've had decades to adjust to growing the complexity of games. I see this as a very large gulf between the skill set of those people who are familiar with and what is required to play AAA games. It's a natural way to input. It's also a way to bring someone used to phone and tablets to the console world. Now, his purpose here, out of quote again, of course, is to include the touchscreen controls and so on the PlayStation 4. By the way, of course, you've also got the ability to use your cell phone or whatever as a second screen, which is one of the things they do cover on the 20 Things You Didn't Know. I'd recommend you check it out, by the way. It's not on this channel. You can Google it or YouTube it, whatever you want to do. It's fairly short, maybe 5 minutes or so. So, worth checking out. You probably knew most of it, but it is kind of cool. Anyway, to continue, it provides an on-ramp so that you can play a console game very much like a console game, a story-driven action-adventure, but in a manageable way. We have the opportunity with the PS4 to fundamentally alter the landscape of gaming. We have the highest richness and variety of content. It will really be the renaissance of gaming, end quote. And, well, of course, the first thing we're going to point out right here, and I think it's fairly important to do so, is of course he's going to be blowing the PlayStation 4's trumpet. However, I have seen several interviews, real life interviews, not personally been there kind of interviews, but certainly seen them recorded on YouTube and so forth, and there are a number of key things on the way that Mark speaks. The most critical, mission critical, at least to my personal perspective, is that he has a passion for gaming. Now, I've actually been very critical about Microsoft, and I've had a few messages, what do you say about Microsoft? And it's not because I dislike Microsoft. I actually really do like them as a company, and I am extremely grateful for what they've done, and not just for PCs, but for the gaming landscape for consoles as well, especially online. I think that the online state for consoles would be different, let's go with that, without the inclusion of Microsoft into the landscape and the world. Although the Dreamcast, of course, did have online play, but it was nowhere near as prevalent, nowhere near to the degree, anyway, of course, as Xbox Live, especially what Halo 2 brought us. But I believe that they have lost some of the focus, and they have been somewhat, I wouldn't use the word guilty, because that doesn't really sound quite right. It doesn't quite sit on. It doesn't really quite sit with me correctly. But they've certainly been accused, if you will, of being somewhat up in the air about the gaming. In terms of the fact that they don't really seem to be concentrating and focusing upon it with the laser precision that we'd expect. And one could argue, of course, that Don Matrick was involved here, but Microsoft themselves really do want to sell themselves as a service. Now, I'm not saying that their approach is wrong, because the thing of it is, and this is my personal opinion, I actually quite like some of the stuff of the Xbox One. In fact, despite the fact that the always-on DRM issues were annoying, including the 24-hour check-in, I actually did quite like some of the features of the always-on, such as the ability, for example, to share some of your games with friends. They could try out the games and that kind of thing. So I understand their creative vision. However, one thing that I do agree with on Sony, and this is from someone who's owned all the PlayStations, the PS1, PS2, and PS3. I never really bothered with the handheld ones, simply because I don't really typically find myself able to game when I'm traveling. I don't know why. This is just a slight personal side. I find that if I game while I'm traveling, whether it's in a car or whether it's on a bus or even on a train, I find myself getting a little bit motion sick or whatever. I don't know why that is. I can do other things like reading Facebook or whatever on the phone, that's fine, but gaming, I don't know why. I'm someone who doesn't even suffer from motion sickness otherwise, but just that really seems to mess me up, so I just don't typically do it, so there's not really been a point in me buying portable. Regardless, I have owned all the PlayStations, and one of the things that I would concur with, and this has been something that many have actually criticised the next generation of consoles with, and I think that I'm going to quickly touch on it on this video and maybe speak about it more in another one, but the PlayStation doesn't really, and of course talking about the PS4, doesn't really have anything that I would consider either unique or next generation. Maybe I'll get some flack for that. There are a couple of what I would consider logical progressions. One of them would be the touchscreen on the controller. I'm not going to say they stole the idea from Nintendo or any such nonsense, because, as I said, some of it is just pure logical progression. As is the ability for, say, cross-game share, as is various other social aspects, including sharing of footage and so forth. I don't really think that that's... I think it's cool features, don't get me wrong, but I don't really think it's next-generation stuff. But then I've always been someone who finds myself very hard to be pleased with next-generation stuff, because I think sometimes people band it about really, really, really readily. And sometimes I think that people get lost in it. And I think that one of the things that the focus behind the PS4 wasn't to make something necessarily next generation in terms of, it could defy gravity and anyone within its, anti-gravity field can fly. That's not the purpose of the console. The purpose of the console was to make something at a reasonable price. I'm sorry guys, I just caught the microphone. There's no way I'll be able to edit that out. Sorry. I'm gesturing with my hands. I just have that habit while I speak. It's good for articulation, don't you know? And I find that the PlayStation 4 was logical in that they realized that the architecture was just good on the PlayStation 3, but it needed a little bit of work. The other thing that I didn't like about the PS3, and Mark, as well as Sony themselves, have admitted this several times over, to be fair, that the lineup for the PS3 was, I wouldn't use the word lackluster, because that's overly critical, but it certainly wasn't as strong. It wasn't exactly titanium when they launched it, and that's, to be fair, kind of similar for a lot of consoles. Even the Xbox 360 had an okay lineup. There were a couple of games that I actually played quite heavily, including Cameo, including Perfect Dark Zero, which is unusual because I've heard quite a few people didn't actually like that title yet. I'm actually quite a fan, but there you go. So, yeah, I think that Sony are definitely on the right track, and they're starting to realise that gaming as a landscape is starting to change. AAA games are definitely still going to be there. They're going to be there for a while. But as budgets balloon for these games, I mean, you just heard how many people Destiny has working for it. And let's assume that you're paying those guys an average of, like, $20,000. Let's even use, a very basic kind of math. Take $20,000 for each of the people who work there as a median, and then you work that out over a couple of years or whatever. And this is by no means a scientific calculation. Then you start adding in stuff such as marketing, the actual everything that goes into a game. Okay, I don't really need to explain everything that goes into a game, but you guys get the idea. And you could start imagining, you can quickly imagine actually, just how rapidly costs start to balloon. And I've also spoken about this previously, but I believe it was Uncharted 2. It was either 1 or 2. I'm fairly certain it was 2. Actually, it was 2 because they spoke about how it was an evolution of the first. And it cost something like 30 million US dollars or so to create this game. And let's just be honest. The budget for The Last of Us is certainly going to have ballooned double that at least. But this is the thing. The PS4 is supposedly and has been created so that you can develop for it really easily. Now, I will confess, I actually have a somewhat vested interest in both of the next generation consoles, that would be the Xbox and the PlayStation, doing really well with the x86-64 architecture, because at heart, I do love console gaming, as many of you know, but at heart, I am a PC gamer, and I actually want to be covering more of the PC stuff as well on the channel, because it's been fairly, I wouldn't say, it's to say I haven't covered it as well as I should have the last couple of weeks. It's just because of the glut of console news. Regardless, so I'm actually really happy about this, because that means we're no longer going to be putting up with so many piss-poor conversions as well. So in my opinion, this is good news for everyone concerned, and that's great, because obviously the better, what words can I use? The better the gaming communities are integrated, the better for everyone concerned, at least in my personal opinion. And so I think many of us are going to be agreeing that gaming is going to be changing quite substantially over the life of the PS4. And of course, to be fair, I don't necessarily agree. I don't necessarily subscribe to all of the points that Mark has made. I don't necessarily agree that in, say, 4 years' time, we're still going to be unlocking the holy grail of the PS4. Many will argue, of course, that you can do so with the PS3, mostly because of the use of the SPU units, which were integral to getting the most out of the system. However, let's face it, the system as a whole, and this is by no means an insult to the system, but it does only have that 1.84 T-flips of computing power, and so I am somewhat concerned when we're going to be talking about, let's say, physics and so forth, or hardware physics and so forth on the system, because obviously it only has a certain pool of power. Regardless, I think it's going to be a very interesting several years, so we'll have to see just how it all goes. Needless to say, I think that's a good place to call the video. Leave me your thoughts below. As per normal, if you want to get hold of me directly, the best option if you want a snappy response would be to go to facebook.com/redgamingtech, and by all means you can give us a like there as well, and I will do my best to respond there as soon as possible. You would be best to address it to either Paul or Crimson Rain, which obviously would be myself, and I will get hold of you as quickly as possible. The reason I point that out is, in case you're new viewers, most regular viewers will know this anyway, but there are several of us working on this channel and with Facebook logins, so if you don't address it to me, someone else may, just be a bit confused, bless them. Anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed the video. I will see you soon, hopefully. So take care and bye for now.